All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to jump on this first webinar that we're putting on from Smart Workforce Management. This one we've called Delivering Workforce Value in Disruptive Times. So before we begin, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself for those that don't know me. My name is Jared McGrath. I'm very much a millennial thinker, a Gen Z thinker. I like to think about how people act and behave and do in this day and age. It's all about putting ourselves in the shoes of how people think and act, and that's what really I'm all about as a person. So I like to think about WFM differently, HR a little bit differently. So really excited to be introducing this webinar series today. I've been around workforce management for a long time. I've been around HR, been around payroll, been around operations for most of my working life. But that's sort of enough about me. What I really want these webinars to be is something that can provide educational value back to those people that become part of them. I really want to be able to give back to WFM and those involved in the workforce and make it of as much value as we can. I'd love over time to expand these webinars to include other people from industry and thought leaders to participate as well. And I'd also encourage active contribution from those that take the time to get on these webinars in terms of what you might like to see in the future, what we do well, what we could do better. So I really want them to provide educational value. I'd like to thank everyone for turning up today. I know it takes time and effort to get on these types of things, so we're going to try and make it quite punchy today and get basically the core content done within half an hour. I really want to appreciate the effort that people have made from around the ecosystem. Today we've got product suppliers on the call, we've got service providers on the call, and most importantly, we've got clients on the call. Thanks to those in the different time zones that have jumped on today and taken time out of your day as well to be part of this. So that's our introduction. Moving along, our agenda for today is basically looking at an introduction to smart workforce management, looking at the evolution of WFM, and I'm going to pose a question very early in our session today, and I think the evolution will be part of helping to understand the statistic that I'm going to talk about. And then we'll look at how organisations can benefit from the advancements in WFM over time. And we'll look at it in a generic sort of a way at first in terms of what benefit you can get from workforce management. And then we'll take a couple of industry specifics around the benefits and then talk to those. And then we'll wrap up today basically by a Q&A and then just a quick overview of the next webinar that we will produce. So before we get going, I thought I'd just take a minute to introduce you to the Smart WFM ecosystem, because without others around us, we wouldn't be able to deliver true value back to the businesses that we work with. So I'm not going to speak specifically about every single item that I've got on this screen right now, but I'll pick a few out and just speak about them. In our associations, one that I'd like to call out is the Maturity Institute. Maturity Institute was originally founded by a couple of chaps who valued businesses from a financial perspective. And essentially, they would look at businesses and they would give them certain credit ratings and certain valuations. And what they realised as they were valuing these businesses is that the untapped value or the tapped value that people provide to a business and the value that they add to it actually becomes a critical part of a business valuation. And it's all related to being able to drive value from those people in your business to actually build the overall brand and the value of that brand. So the Maturity Institute has a number of philosophies that are all around taking people into consideration when you look at the overall value that you drive out of a business. And there's some great thinking as part of the Maturity Institute that we apply in our business. From an organisational point of view, the team have worked across most of the leading WFM technology products over the years, and we have a strong knowledge of the WFM technologies that are in the market at this point in time. We've also worked across many projects over the years, and we bring that knowledge to the clients that we work for. We're 100% focused on workforce management, and we continually use that knowledge to drive initiatives and value back into what we do, and all again through the eyes of the business. As well as that, we've also realised that doing workforce management projects and getting the greater value out of them is a repeatable process. From the start, where you align with organisational goals, through to the measures at the end, and we'll talk about that more as we go on today. As an organisation as well, we're also very mindful of being leaders in the thought leadership space, and we are doing a number of things to really build the profile of WFM and to educate. These webinars, as we were saying earlier, is part of what we're doing to help with that education process. We're also starting to do a lot of public speaking, and next week, for example, I'll be speaking at an event in Brisbane called Disrupt HR, and the topic that I'll be speaking about there is WFM, WTF. And WTF is not always what you think it is, but it's all about raising the profile of WFM and what really is WFM in today's digital age. I'm also going to be writing a book over the remainder of this year, and it's going to be a pretty pragmatic how-to book, and it's really going to be what is workforce management, how can you get value from workforce management, and how to implement and measure the value from workforce management. We also have a strong social conscience at Smart WFM, and we've basically teamed up with the Pledge 1% Foundation, who was founded by the founders of Atlassian and Salesforce.com, which is all about giving back to those that have special purpose to us, and our selected organisation is the Kathy Freeman Foundation. I also just want to take a moment to mention, you feel free to ask any questions as you go along today. Just use the Q&A section, and what we'll do is we'll gather the questions over the course of the next sort of 20 minutes or so, and then we'll address the questions at the end, just so that we can sort of keep things moving in a fairly pragmatic sort of a way. So a statistic that I sort of mentioned earlier on, only 7% of organisations manage their workforce effectively. This was a statistic that when I saw it, I just, even for someone that's been in the industry for so long, I looked at it and thought, my goodness, how could that be so low? And I really had to consider this for quite some time, really think through and unpack in my thinking, how could this figure be what it is? And where I landed was that the evolution of WFM and where it started and where it is now has probably a quite significant impact on why that figure is what it is. So I think it's important to really look at the evolution of workforce management to understand that figure. So WFM has evolved over 120 years, and it started back in the 1890s, and it all started with the invention of the Bundy clock. And the Bundy clock was originally invented so that the Birmingham Bus Company could track the start times and the stop times of their buses when they went out on their routes. And that's where it all started from. And it was all around accuracy. Then over time and pretty much through all of the 1900s, WFM became, let's say, a front end to payroll. And the impacts at that point in time, through until the 70s, were predominantly payroll and staff related. And if I put a little pie chart up there, the purpose of that is just to sort of say that the larger area was the benefits that payroll got from WFM, and the smaller area are the benefits that staff got from WFM. And that was really the foundation of workforce management as we know it. Then if you move forward into the sort of the 1980s and 2000s, WFM really started to become something more. And it basically, in the 1970s, was sort of started by the Ain brothers when they founded Kronos, and they really embedded the first electronic time clock. And what this enabled was to be able to do automatic pay calculations. It enabled you to determine those calculations based off schedules that you would create in a system, a start time and a stop time. And it's similar to what you see on the left over there, where we had paper timesheets. It automated these paper timesheets. And because it did this in a real-time way, it enabled you to get visibility of costs. And you could do things if you had visibility of those costs, because those costs were actually in advance of a pay run. Through that time as well, some self-service functionality was introduced by kiosks. Things like, what is my leave balance? You as an employee could go and find out what your leave balance was, or you might be able to request a leave. Now, if you look at the impact of this then in terms of the business functions, and I think, back to the question about why do only 7% of their workforces or organisations manage their workforce effectively. In the 80s, 90s, 2000s, it introduced new business functions that got benefit from WFM as well. Supervisors now became involved. IT now became involved because of the fact that there was time collection, servers, clients, databases. And finance started to become involved because there was the cost side of things. And as these business functions that WFM impacted became greater, I think that there was not necessarily an understanding within everyone about what these impacts really meant. And let's take an example of supervisors. Often there was two schools of thought around a supervisor. Should a supervisor just concentrate on their task at hand, i.e. bake the bread or serve the next customer in the shop? Or should supervisors take a greater area of responsibility, and should they perhaps manage the staff that work for them, take responsibility for their start times and their stop times, take responsibility for the performance of those staff members? And ultimately, this way of thinking was never really cemented as an industry. So some organisations might put an administrative layer in to do the job that a supervisor might do, whereas other organisations would have a supervisor layer. So there was no real consistency in the way that workforce management was owned and operated in a business. So let's move forward to where we're at now, and we look at, you know, what modern day WFM can provide, and we look at things like forecasting, prediction, analytics, flexibility from a staff point of view, being able to determine when you're on a shift or when you might want to take some time off, and artificial intelligence learning from all of this data that's around. And the impacts of this within a business grew even greater, to operations management, to HR, to senior management, to robotics. And again, all of these business functions, the impacts of those are not necessarily well understood. So when you come back and you consider how well you manage your workforce, there are a lot of considerations that you need to take into play. And I put, you know, a final graph up there. The impacts on your business now are so far wide and varied, and I even sort of question, you know, myself at this point of view, and this is sort of a, you know, my point of view now, and is, do we perhaps even need a new role in an organisation called a Chief Workforce Officer? And then I question, with robots and AI coming into play, is the role human resources correct? Because is it now really workforce resources? So there's a whole lot of things that are taking place in the industry that we need to consider. So moving forward, let's look at a couple of examples around benefits from an industry perspective. And I've just picked a couple of industries today, health and retail, and thought we'd just sort of, you know, briefly look through some of the benefits from a practical point of view. So if I look at what organisations are trying to achieve, there's certainly some common areas across all industries. So if I take getting a complete view of workforce, for example, that's something that's very top of mind for most organisations when it comes to the workforce, because the profile is changing. There's more workers in the gig type space, you know, contract, short-term work, contingent work, full-time, part-time, and if you really want to manage your workforce effectively, you need to get a complete view of your workforce. There's still a lot of organisations out there today that still have paper entry or multiple points of entry. So many organisations that have this, we're seeing a commonality of a real desire to improve this process and automate this process. But then if I look at health, for example, and I look at the Australian market now when I talk about this, if you're a provider of healthcare services to participants, as they're now known, the whole market has moved from funding being supplied by the government, where the service providers could determine how they wanted to allocate that funding, to now the government are only going to supply the funding based off the services that the service providers supply. And that's just changed a whole industry. Take for example, the care worker that looks after one of their, and I don't even like to call them participants here, they're almost their friends, because they go and they look after these friends who are in need, and they provide services, and all of a sudden these care workers have to track every minute of the time that they work for, because their service provider isn't going to get paid unless they do it. And there are far-reaching implications around this, and And there's a whole transformation that needs to take place in health at the moment to enable this. And workforce management is actually at the core of this transformation. Take retail, for example. Retail is about being able to provide really personalised service by your associates in your store to your consumers. And it's all about making sure that you've got an alignment of those associates in your store, the workers in your store, to actually help the customers that are coming into your store. And you want to be able to make sure that that balance is correct so that you can maximise the value that you provide back to those to your customers, and be able to provide that personalisation to actually help drive the growth, the overall growth of your business, and help make those customers loyal to your business. And again, workforce management is actually at the core of being able to drive these initiatives. So I think there's a couple of practical examples of industries. And another question, I guess, is, why didn't I include other industries on there? Each industry, while there are some things that are common, there are also nuances within the industry as well. So from an industry point of view, it's about understanding what the nuances are of those particular industries. So if we have a look now at the success steps to achieve the benefits from WFM, what we've really seen over all the years of having been in this industry is that the process of actually achieving benefits is quite predictable, and there's a certain journey that you undertake to deliver those benefits. And I've sort of defined the journey there as a 5-step journey. And ultimately, as an organisation, you can be in any one of those steps. It doesn't really matter where you are, but it's about understanding where you are in this journey. And the steps that I've got marked there as red are typically the steps that are absolutely imperative to drive the greatest value from your workforce. And if those steps in red aren't done correctly, that's where the chances are higher that you fall into the 7% category of not managing your workforce effectively. So it's not often the senior management within an organisation are generally very clear about what they're trying to achieve from an organisational point of view. What we find is that the delivery of that organisational vision and those goals doesn't always cascade in a consistent way down through those in the organisation that are trying to deliver the benefits from workforce. And if those goals aren't delivered consistently, then you're not necessarily going to achieve the benefits. And then you look at the requirements, for example. So often, if you look at an organisation, the technology layer is often implemented correctly, but it may not be aligned to what the organisation's trying to achieve. So often over the years, I've seen an RFP get released to market that's got requirements in it, and the technology suppliers get those requirements and they answer the RFP and they deliver a technology layer that can meet the requirements of what an organisation is asking for. And then they go and implement that, and it gets implemented correctly. But ultimately, it doesn't aligned to the organisational goals. So when it gets implemented, while it might meet the scope and the statement of work and all of these other things, it doesn't necessarily align to what the organisation are trying to achieve. Or it may not necessarily be aligned to all of those business functions that we spoke about earlier on. Similarly, you can get to a management and risk area, which is another one that I've marked red, and often you can have a governance layer that exists on one of these initiatives, but that governance layer doesn't necessarily understand the full implications of what it means to all of those other business areas. So while the governance might work on one level, if it doesn't take into consideration all of the business impacts, it's not going to truly deliver the right value from workforce. So I think really to sort of sum up what I'm talking about here, the whole journey to get workforce right is about realizing that WFM is far more than a front end of payroll. It's actually a management discipline, philosophy that impacts almost every part of your business. And to get it right, you need to understand what all of those implications are. So that was really what I wanted to cover off from a journey or a roadmap to move through a process of delivering successful WFM. So where to from here? I'm mindful that we're sort of coming up to the 30-minute mark, and what I wanted to do now was just take a moment to do some question and answer, and I'm just going to lean over to the side and look at any question and answers that have been raised. And I can see that there's a couple of questions that have actually come through over here. The first one is, how do you get other departments involved? And I'm assuming when I read that question, it comes back to the diagram that we showed earlier on, which was about the different business functions that are impacted now in the current day and age. And I think there's no silver bullet to actually getting all the other departments involved. I think it's an education process, and it's about taking those from senior management right through to the operational coalface on a journey of moving through that process of getting them involved. But I think a lot of it is to do with really telling a story as to why they need to be involved and why they need to be there. I've seen many senior management or many people in senior management sign off on a WFM initiative over the years and then walk away from it thinking that it's going to be delivered successfully. And it's understandable that they've walked away because they haven't known that they've needed to stay around and to drive that organisational vision right through the organisation. So I think that there's no silver bullet, but it's a journey in terms of delivering it. Another question, how do you become involved in the webinar series? Quite simply, it's reach out and feel free to contact us. So another one I'm just looking at, how do you get your customer to look past the software, given that the world seems to think that the software leads to the outcome? It's about coming back to I think getting the organisational vision aligned with the senior management in the first instance, because the software is really only a tool at the end of the day to deliver a business imperative. And if you're trying to drive whatever it may be. You're trying to drive greater value out of your workforce in terms of the what would I say, the flexibility, for example, that you're trying to drive into your workforce. Then what you actually need to do is give that user or that part of the business the tools that they need, the education that they need to be successful. I think it's about working with the business and staying involved with the business and just staying close to those business outcomes. And just looking over here to see what other questions have come in. It's sort of similar to the last question, I think, this one. How do I know if I can get more value out of WFM? I think really it's about coming back to that evolution slide that we talked about. And I think if you were to work through all of those areas of business benefit, if you were to look at that and you were to answer any of those and go, gee, I'm not sure about that, or I think there's something else we could do in this area, then I think that's where you would know that you can get more value out of WFM. So yeah, so I'm just sort of looking at the questions that we've had raised. That sort of covers off the main bulk of those questions. I'm also mindful of the time, and we sort of said that we were going to take 30 minutes out of your day today. So I think I'll just sort of wrap up at this point. Thank you for jumping on, everyone. And it's all about just recapping, making these webinars educational, wanting to expand these sessions over time to include other industry leaders and people that are really passionate about this subject, and just getting active involvement. And at this point, I'd just like to really thank everyone that's taken the time out today for jumping on the call. We're always contactable. We're always happy to help. We'd love to receive input from you on things that you'd like to find out about into the future. And most of all, I hope everyone has found this webinar of some interest today, and I hope that you did get some educational value out of it. So thank you again, everyone, and we'll get some communications out in the not too distant future about our next webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing you all again in the not too distant future. Have a good day. Thank you very much.